Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this in the world. I hope you guys are doing okay. So today I wanted to discuss something that I was speaking about with some friends in private, and I've spoken about with a couple of pro players before, and I've had conversations with the casual players in my comment section, and there always seems to be a bit of the butting of the heads between both sides of the coin. Now, when I was talking to Tom Brady recently, we were talking about casuals and pros, and Tom Brady said something that I thought was very interesting and also very true. And what he said was that in basketball, they separate the amateurs from the professionals. In most sports, they separate the amateurs from the professionals. But in fighting games, casuals and pros exist in the same arena. And there seems to be a mindset or a common notion that both sides cannot get along. I see a lot of pushback from both sides. I think a lot of people get pushed into camps that they're not necessarily a part of. And I think the assumption is made that people are playing sides and not listening to the voices of people that oppose them. The reason I wanted to make this video is that I think there's a misconception, at least with my channel, that the opinions of the bedroom champions, you might say, or the casual players are not valid, or that the pro players are destroying and ruining the fun for everybody else. So I wanted to give my 2 cents on this, because I do get a lot of comments on my videos from intermediate to pro players, and I get comments on my videos from a lot of casual players. And again, I think the common sentiment is that both sides don't necessarily care for the opinions of the others, and one side might be destroying the game for the other side. The hardcore community might be thinking that the casual players are advocating for changes that dumb down the game and essentially destroy what it is at its core, and that pro players are asking for systems that make it too hard and too unfun for people that just want to turn it on and play for a little bit. So one of the first questions I got was, who gets more of a say in where a game goes? We're going to use fighting games as a reference, although I will reference some other games. Now, in my opinion, I think that objectively speaking, casual players probably get more of a say in the direction that a game goes because they are the driving force behind it. As much as the intermediate and pro players might want to have things go their way completely, if the casual market is not happy with the game, if the everyday consumer is not happy with the game is not going to do well, and ultimately the game will disappear. So in my opinion, it's very, very important to hear from the casual players and hear what they want. And yes, that goes for games that are traditionally for hardcore players. I don't want my games to disappear, so for me it's about finding a healthy middle ground. A good example of this is Tekken 6. Now, I don't know how many of you were playing Tekken back then. Obviously, I've expressed multiple times I started very young. Obviously, Tekken 1 came out when I was very, very young, and I managed to pick it up later down the line, and then my parents got me Tekken 2, and by then Tekken 3 was probably on its way. Been there from the beginning playing the game, so I understand how difficult they were and where they've gone. The turning point for Tekken was in Tekken 6. Tekken 6 introduced something that was completely alien to Tekken that nobody had ever seen, and it was a comeback mechanic. Tekken had always been known as kind of like this raw martial arts game, close to Virtua Fighter, a little bit more anime. Virtua Fighter was a little bit more grounded, I'd say, but Tekken was quite well respected for that. They introduced a rage mechanic, and they also introduced characters with fighting styles that we've never seen before, like Elisa and Lars, that were more akin to like anime. And I remember at the time, Tekken veterans did not like this. And I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't like it either. The rage mechanic was implemented because in Tekken, generally the better player would gain the life lead and then control the flow of the match. And it was very, very difficult for new players or intermediate players to play with these people that have been playing for a long time. And so games like Tekken end up becoming a niche because people just don't want to deal with that sort of BS. It's very different from a difficult first-person shooter or third-person shooter or a team-based game where you can rely on your teammates to sort of pick up the slack. It's all up to you. So I believe they created the rage mechanic to help newer players. And I hated it when I first saw it, but I understood it. I understood why they did it. Now, I think instead of just complete pushback from the pro side of the scene or the intermediate side of the scene, I think understanding why they did it is a good thing, and then talking about how it can be toned down a little bit, because you want to invite new players into the scene, you want them to be there, but you don't want the mechanic that is bringing them in to ruin what made the game special in the first place, because casual players tend to move on very quickly. They don't stick around, and then you're stuck with a game for like 8 years that's basically a shell of its former self. So I used Tekken 6 as a basis for this because Tekken 6 was really the launch pad for when Tekken started implementing mechanics to make things easier for people that were struggling with the game. The middle ground that I think pros can meet casuals with regards to the rage mechanic is that yes, they made the character more powerful so that you can come back, but maybe scale down the amount of power so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. In my opinion, that is meeting in the middle, rather than telling one side to shut up and deal with it and get better, or the casual players saying that you pro players ruin everything. I think you can implement a system to welcome people in, but also not have it too overwhelming. You can also see this in Tekken 7. They implemented super moves. Super moves were really implemented because they're very flashy, they're very cool to look at, and people like throwing them out for big damage, right? right? It's very little effort for big damage. And I understand this and I don't mind it. If you asked me personally, would I want them in the game? No. But I want more people playing the games that I play because I want them to live on. So what's the healthy middle ground? Well, you get to do a super move, but if it gets blocked, I get to fully punish you, right? There's a bit of give and take. I also think depending on when you do the super move, it should have varying degrees of damage, which is something that Namco actually did. Tekken Team actually did do that, so I thought that was good. And even if you look at some of the other mechanics that were implemented into the game, like armored attacks, I don't actually have a problem with armored attacks. However, I think there's a way to do them that is good for everyone and a bad way to do them. Tekken 7 implemented them, and so I was willing to be a little bit more lenient because it was the first time. However, it was very clear there were certain armor attacks that needed to be changed. For example, I used Negan. Most people know that I was a Negan main in Tekken 7 along with Marduk and Feng Wei. And one of Negan's moves was forward 1+2, and he could launch you. It was an armored launcher. Now, in my opinion, objectively speaking, even though it benefited me greatly and I secured a lot of W's because of that move, that is stupid and that should not be a thing. At the very least, you can get a follow-up from an armored move, but getting a full launcher is objectively silly. And so in Tekken 8, we saw that some characters like Negan and Hwoarang, who had armored launchers, had them scaled down. Obviously, Negan did not come back. Hwoarang's still in the game, and his armored launcher was scaled down so that he only gets a follow-up now. So it's still strong, but a middle ground is met. And obviously now we have the heat mechanic, which is really good for newcomers because it allows them to come back in a very powerful way. It essentially turns your character into a Super Saiyan and it locks the defender in place, and so it makes them feel very strong. It makes them feel like they're somewhat in control of the match even when things seem dire. Now personally, as somebody that's been playing Tekken for a long time, all of these systems, or at least most of them, not all of them, I could do without. However, I understand that the heat mechanic is something that some newcomers seem to enjoy. I think it's a little bit more controversial than the other mechanics, but I do think there needs to be some pushback on it as well. So I think casuals and pros could probably work together to find a healthy middle ground instead of bickering with each other, because arguing back and forth and throwing insults at each other doesn't really serve any of us. So the heat mechanic is here to stay right now. I have suggested 10 changes which I made a video about. I'll link it in the description below in case you haven't seen it. To not remove the heat mechanic, because that would be a waste of time in suggesting that, because nobody's going to do that, but to say, okay, this mechanic is here, it should be strong, otherwise it's going to be obsolete, but here are things we can do to make the game more fun to play 5 to 8 years from now. Because remember, as much as the voices of the casuals are important, it's good to remember that it's going to be the casual to intermediate player, the one that wants to learn more / pro, that is going to stick around and play the game. Or not even necessarily pro, but we could say enthusiast. And so we need to make the game fun for everybody, and so everybody sits around and plays it for a long period of time, or people want to come back and play it. You don't want to dumb the game down too much, because then it destroys creativity in the game. Everybody's doing the same thing. Now Tekken hasn't done that. I would say Mortal Kombat's kind of done that, although they seem to be coming out of that slowly with the inclusion of more cameos and more characters. I watched a bit of Ninja Killer playing Homelander, and it definitely looks like you can get pretty creative with Homelander, so props to them if they're going down that road. But there's a tendency to make things easier. Now, I don't have a problem with making things easier. My problem comes when you dumb things down, and I actually think dumbing down games isn't really good even for casual players. I think games should be easy to get into but hard to master. And I don't even necessarily think that casual players hate playing hard games, because games like the Dark Souls franchise are super popular. People love them, and people are willing to invest because there is massive reward if you're able to overcome the difficulty. So it's very important that developers don't just listen to people that are asking for things to either be completely nerfed or dumbed down. I think there needs to be grounds that are met to make things easier, not dumb. And so why am I making this video? You're probably wondering. Well, because we have loads of discussions about Tekken. Tekken is the main source of content on this channel, although that will obviously move around. You guys can probably tell I like talking about loads of different things, but as of now it's Tekken, and we're having this sort of like tug of war of whose voices should be listened to for the benefit of the game. But I really just wanted to say that I think both voices are very important. I think both voices are vital to the game's lifespan, and I don't think that casual players should be offended when pro players are asking for things to be made a little bit more difficult, or for certain mechanics that make the game too easy to be toned down. And I don't think pro players should get angry when casual players are asking for systems to help them. I think a healthy middle ground needs to be met. I think we need to recognize that casual players keep these games alive. We wouldn't have any of these fighting games if it wasn't for the casual audience, because the more tuned in audience, or the intermediate audience, they are like the 1 or 2% at best. But I think the casual player should also understand that these more intermediate to pro players probably understand the game on a much deeper level and can offer some real insight into how the game can be improved. I mean, it's not like these developers developers have not called in high level players before to help fine tune things. So all of that to say that one of the things that I plan on doing going forward is having people on my Discord or having people on a call where we can debate certain fighting game topics back and forth. And this doesn't need to be people with YouTube channels. It doesn't need to be people with large followings. If you have an opinion on something and you're genuinely there wanting to get some answers or wanting to have some pushback with me or anybody else, I'm going to try and facilitate a place where your everyday person who's just in the comment section that maybe wants to say something can jump on and debate their points. And I'm not really going to put any rules on it either. So if you want to say whatever you want to say, you go ahead and you do it. Obviously it's going to be pre-recorded, so if you say something insane then it just won't make it into the episode. But I do want to try and bridge the gap between casual and pro player, because again, I read the comments. You know, I'm sure you guys can see that I go through the comments. I like certain comments, I dislike certain comments, I reply back to a lot of you, and I can see that there's definitely a disconnect between the casual scene and the pro scene. And like Tom Brady said, we both exist in the same arena, we both share the same arena, we share the same game, and ultimately we want the game to be as good as possible. Now we're not all going to agree, but I do think conversation is healthy, and I do think that it's good to have conversations about these things. Just to close off this video, I did see this very funny comment left in my held to review section. Now I'm thinking of doing a whole video series of held to review. I've had some insane comments come through there. I always approve them, so if you've said something wild and you're like, where's my comment, did he delete it? I didn't delete it. If you say something insane, YouTube will actually just get rid of it, but most of the time they go into my held for review. I went in there this morning to check what was in there and I saw this comment, so I wanted to reply to it just to give some context, because I think this person is lacking in it. We're in so much deep shit and you sheeple still just complain about petty BS like this. So cringe and degenerate. Fills me with so much pride that I'm not a loser stuck in the matrix like you little bitches. There's a good reason why they call you bugs and useless eaters. Now what I'd say to you is that if you're not a loser stuck in the matrix, what are you doing commenting on a loser's video that is stuck in the matrix? What were you doing wasting your time watching a Tekken video about new players versus veterans if you've got so much important stuff going on? So the reason that I wanted to highlight this comment is that there are idiots like this individual, and I'm sorry to start name calling, but you've got to be some level of stupid to write something like this, to not understand that this YouTube channel and many other YouTube channels, whether it's gaming or whatever it might be, are just talking about a specific topic. People go outside, they have their jobs, they have their families, they have their day-to-day activities that they take part in. You have got to be some level of dumb to think that myself or anybody else in the comment section that is talking about these things are only talking about Tekken and that's it. The purpose of this channel is for fighting games and games in general, but that doesn't mean that's all I'm doing. That doesn't mean that's all that the people in my comment section are doing, and that doesn't mean that is all that anybody is doing on their channels. It's for that specific purpose. Now I don't know what you're talking about here. It sounds like you've been watching too many videos on TikTok. However, if we are in some deep shit, please go outside and handle business for us, because clearly we don't know how to. And for anybody else that is ever confused at channels like this, wondering why are these people talking about it, it's because a lot of the time we find it fun to discuss fighting games. We find it fun to discuss boxing, right? I had a YouTube boxing channel with one of my friends a long time ago that no longer exists. I find it fun to talk about the UFC. I find it fun to talk about Formula 1. I like debating random topics. Does that mean that is your entire life? No, obviously not. And I'm sure that the imbecile that wrote this comment probably has other things going on. Just because people are sitting around talking about games does not mean that is all that is going on for them. I'm sure that is for some people. I'm sure it is. But for most of us, it's the same as when you come home from work and you just want to unwind and watch a TV show. My channel here is to discuss fighting games. Now, if you want to talk about the Matrix, there are places for that. Go to Twitter. It's a great place for it. But over here, we like to clown NRS. We like to talk about the issues in Tekken, speculate about upcoming fighting games, talk about other things going on in the culture, and then everybody goes about their day, mate. It's not that deep. Anyways, guys, like I said, I'm going to open up that discussion to all kinds of people from all walks of life. I think it would be good to have discussions about these things. Of course, if you don't want to, you just want to continue commenting in the comment section below, then by all means. But I enjoy these discussions. I enjoy talking to you guys. I always look forward to reading your comments. And like I said, I'd like to bridge the gap between the casual and the pro player so that there can be a healthy discussion between both. Anyways, guys, have a good day. Take care and peace.